Good morning, Sarah.
Good morning. You've got me and Gavin. We're just trying to, sorry, we're a little bit late.
That's okay.
Okay, right. Hi.
Hi there. This is, did you say Gavin?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Gavin's taking back the EOTC coordinator portfolio. My role is more of the administrative support behind the scenes and trying to get Schoolbridge working for our end users. Yeah, so Gavin's the one who will be doing all of the approving and so on. So both of us are just trying to get our heads around how to get the workflow in Schoolbridge working effectively for
Okay. Well,
EOTC.
yeah, well, you're getting into it again at a really good time because probably since you last looked at the system, there's been a lot of developments. We worked last year really intensely with Education Outdoors New Zealand. We helped them redesign the coordinators toolkit, and on the basis of that, added a bunch of new features to support the toolkit and ways of doing EOTC. We've also, I don't know, Sarah or Gavin, if you were aware of the system that Jono Wyeth set up at Green Bay a few years ago using Google tools.
Yes,
Well,
I've seen it.
yeah, well, Jono has now converted everything into Schoolbridge, and he's made his templates and everything that he has set up available for other schools to utilize if you should want to. So what I can do is I'll give you a little background again on the system and a bit of the changes, and then I can show you what's available. Does that sound good?
Yeah, cool.
Sounds good.
Okay, so just take a step back and going to show you this little overflow chart. And what this does is it allows me to show you sort of that how that EONS methodology matches up inside of Schoolbridge, and how we can streamline that with the tools that we've got in there. Okay, so now what we've have the possibility of is having staff start with their initial proposal. And we've got a couple of really good examples of that, a streamlined version of that. So that's that EONS form number 1. And then also now we can link in the permission slip to the proposal. So before in Schoolbridge, any staff member could jump in, create a permission slip, and send it out to caregivers. But we got a lot of feedback from schools saying, can we please get some oversight on that before it can be sent out? And that also fits in with a EON's sort of way of doing things of, having an approval team look at that before it goes out. And the other advantage of working this way now is you can have your sort of limiting what they start on. And that way they're not potentially doing work that might be in vain if later on their overall event doesn't get approved. And they're not having to wonder, okay, do I need this? Do I need that? So we start them off on the basics so that way you can get sort of the ball rolling. And so they would submit those two elements in, and that comes into what we could consider the initial approval stages. And as you're probably aware, you can set up any number of these. This is just typically what I see at most schools, where first they use what we call the dynamic approval stage, where they can choose their HOD that goes in. They are going to approve it based on, the curriculum, looking at the curriculum and maybe what else is going on in the department. They approve it, and then it could come to the EOTC coordinator, and you're going to look at it from a perspective of health and safety, supervision requirements, maybe evaluate any external providers, that sort of thing. And then another stage we'll commonly see in here is a calendar approval, because whatever's being proposed needs to fit in with what else is going on at school. And again, this is just an example. You don't have to set your system up exactly like this, but it's just sort of what we see as a baseline at most schools. And you can also, if you're a smaller school, they sometimes might compress these into one sort of stage, pre-approval stage, where you're considering, these 3 things or whatever else. But at any point, this is our initial stage. And then the reason this calendar is outlined in the orange is because this becomes our sort of hinge point. So we're saying that after this, if it gets approved following the calendar stage, we're green lighting this and we're going ahead into the planning phase, and we're actually going to attempt to do this event. And so then in that planning stage, that's when we can have all of the additional planning elements flow into the process if and when they're required. So back up here on our initial proposal form, we'll have questions like, does this event require transport? Is this event weather dependent? And any number of things. And we can actually use that to trigger rules that we set up to have those other things come in again automatically if and when they're required. So that way you're not having to chase people with the forms that they need. They're not having to wonder what they need. It just happens automatically. Okay.
And that's something that I need some help, because I was trying to set the rules and wasn't finding that was working so well. So yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Anything that you do is usually going to have a element of risk assessment involved, whether that's a full brand new risk assessment for something that's super high risk or brand new that you're doing, or if you can sort of streamline it with standard operating procedures. So that way, again, just make things more streamlined. And we'll talk about this and show you some really good examples on that. And then likewise, we'll have a question in the initial form. Does this require transport? Is it weather dependent? And we'll add those other planning forms in if we need to. And then during that whole planning phase, we've got a bunch of tools in the system to help you keep your team on track. And we'll cover those too. So all that planning stuff can get submitted in and then follow up with your final approval stages. So that's probably coming back to you for checking the planning and perhaps approving the permission slip at that point. So remember up here, we've submitted in the permission slip as part of the overall process. That way you can evaluate the students that are involved, the proposed letter that's going home, if there are costs, any of those elements that go into making up a permission slip. So it's really important to know that in Schoolbridge, when we say permission slip, we don't just mean the consent form. That is part of it, but we also mean all of those other things that really constitute a permission slip. And you can approve that permission slip at any time manually in your process, or if you let it go through to final approval, it becomes automatically approved. You can also, you'll also have some instances where you might not want, or you might have staff that need to either send permission slips or use the permission slip system for other things that don't need to tie it to an approval process. And you can do that too by giving certain staff members special permission for that. Okay, but you're going to evaluate it, perhaps approve the permission slip at that point, and then pass it through. You're going to approve it. It will go to the board, SLT, or principal, however that needs to be. And then I've now really recommend having it come back to you for any final tweaks. So that would be a final approval stage where it comes back to you, where you can do any final checks or tweaks, and maybe even have it as there as a fixed thing. So you record that you've had a final kind of HUI meeting that you've said, okay, everything's in place and we're ready to go. Anyway, that can go and then gets approved at that point, and the event can occur, and you can set a default evaluation stage that happens so that you choose the evaluation form that's appropriate for the workflow, and then it goes sends a reminder to the submitter 3 days after the event. Hope you've had a good event. Please do your review form now to take everything full circle. Okay. All right, so I'll slide that out of the way. And then I think what I'll do is I'll jump in and just show you a one example here. This is when I sign in, I'm signed in here as Spike. He's the EOTC coordinator at Tidewater College. And when he signs in and he clicks on staff forms, what he sees here are his submissions. So my submissions. So anything that he might have submitted. But because he's an approver, he's seeing this area, forms to approve. And you could see we've got a special filter for unapproved. So those are things that haven't been approved yet. And you can see there are 9 things waiting for Spike to approve. If we look down this, if I actually switch it to all, we'll see all the statuses, and we'll see we've got things that are on pending, which mean they're waiting approval. We've got things that are approved. We've got things that are set to more info. That means they've gone back to the original submitter. They need to add some more info. We've got evaluation. So, and there's also completed, which I don't have an example of here. I guess I don't. No. But what we're going to do is look here at this one, which is a submission by Ursula, UFA. She submitted it. It's an EOTC proposal. We can see which form she's used, and we can see of the approval process. It's currently on stage 2 of a 6-stage process, and the approver that's up to bat right now is Spike. So we'll go in and have a look at this. So up here at the top, we see a condensed view of the approval process, and indeed we're on stage 2 of 6. If we expand this out, we can actually see who's responsible for each of the stages. The first stage there was Carrie. That was the dynamic HOD stage, and she's already given her approval on this. And we've got her comment there, which she wrote, looks good to me, I approve. For every time an approval is given, you've got to give a comment with it, but you can preset those comments to, again, to streamline things. And now you can see this stage is highlighted. We're on the stage that's called EOTC Coordinator Initial Approval, and that's Spike's in charge of that. And then after Spike approves it, it will go down to Doreen, Cara, and then down the line. Okay, so then, and then down below here, we see our forms. And thus far in the process, we've got our proposal form. We've got the weather check form for recording the weather forecasts. We've got a standard operating procedures form for the adrenaline forest. And we've got our permission slip. So this is the LinkedIn permission slip that you can see is waiting to be approved. It hasn't been approved yet, so Ursula can't send it out yet. We can see that there are 75 students on this trip. It should be showing the due date and the event date here as well. I missed that. Here's the communication to caregivers. So this is the event letter that Ursula is proposing to send to caregivers. And she did this with the help of a template. So when she created her permission slip, there was a template automatically loaded for her, and she just needed to change the relevant details for her event. And then here down below, we can see the consent form that Ursula has chosen for this. So that way you can, again, decide, has she chosen the appropriate consent form? And then we've got the students involved, and we can see that. And this is actually live. So even once this gets approved and Ursula sends it out, your approval team or anybody else that would have access to look here can see that data, who's approved, who's declined as well from here. Okay, now you'll also notice that this intentions form, this proposal form is locked. So if Ursula looks at this right now, she can't make any changes. And when she submitted it, it said, Ursula, are you sure you want to submit this? Because when you do, it will become locked. And we do that to have, oversight. So they just can't go in and change things without you knowing about it. But you will want them to change things from time to time. And we'll notice here that Ursula has demonstrated her ability to speak Latin, but we're going to need her to change that. So I could decline it and say, well, this is not acceptable, decline it. But of course, that's going to kill it outright. So instead of doing that, what we can do is we can unlock it. And that will essentially send it back to Ursula. And we're going to unlock it. And when Spike does that, it will automatically take him into the discussion area for this submission. So every submission, whether it's for EOTC or staff leave or whatever, it creates this discussion area where we also keep a action log. So all these white lines are actions that happen, and we record those. So back on November 17th, Ursula submitted it, and then Carrie approved it with her comment is recorded there, and on down. And then the next thing happened was a form got automatically added in, the coordinator's checklist. And then it's gone to Spike, and you can see that he unlocked it. It recorded that he unlocked it, and when he did, it brought him into here, and it sent Ursula a notification that her form was unlocked, as well as this message to her saying, "Ursula, can you please add some more details about who will be driving the bus?" And that, again, she got an email. She clicked on the email that brought her in back to her submission, and she realized that she needed help from another staff member. So she roped in Keaton by using what we call the @mention feature. Here she typed the @ symbol, and then she found Keaton. She said to him, "Hey, Keaton, can you please let us know who will be driving?" Because he was the person in charge or had that information. And that sent in turn a email notification to Keaton. He was able to click the link, join the conversation, and say, "Sure, it will be me, Kath, and Bob." And so that was the information that Ursula needed to amend her form, which she did, and she resubmitted it. And that's where we are now with it, back to Spike where he can approve it. Okay, any questions on that?
No, I've got a couple of questions we can follow up with around setting up, but no, that'll make sense at the moment.
Okay, now I just want to point out one other thing here, and this has been about, going in and being able to sort things out when things aren't going as expected. So we took Schoolbridge through COVID, and that taught us a lot about the fact that you can't have a system that's too rigid or too hard to change. So when Spike approves this, it's going to go to Doreen. And let's say Doreen's out sick. And if that was the case and she wasn't around, even though she really could sign in from home and still doing it, but maybe she's really, really sick, she's not able to do that or not willing to. So that would mean this whole thing would get stuck. So if that's the case, what you can do is you can delete her stage. You as an approver can do that. And you can also add a stage to make up for it if you would need to. And you can see we've got the ability here. So this was the dynamic stage where Ursula chose Carrie. If you feel that she chose the wrong HOD or for whatever reason it would need to get reassigned, you can do that. You can reset a stage. So if you need to sort of walk things back a stick, you can reset the approval that was given. And then we can delete any stages and we can add stages. We also have some of those functions here in the magic ... menu where you can change the dates. So that's a very frequent one where you just need to change the dates, and that will allow you to change the overall dates for the event. And you can also set things back to draft. So say if things get really out of shape and you just want to start over, you can reset it to draft. It will clear out any of the approvals and reset it to draft for Ursula to submit when she's ready again. And when you do that, it's also good because it keeps the history in here. So all the actions that happened prior to you setting to draft are also kept. So you get that sort of digital paper trail. One other thing I forgot to mention. Not only do we have the submitter forms, but now we've also got the ability to have approver forms. So these forms are the purview of just your approval team. And if you look at the EON's coordinators, the coordinators toolkit, you'll see peppered throughout there the sort of suggestion of places for the evaluators or the approvers, coordinators to keep notes and tick things off. And so what this acts as is a sort of a sidecar form to the overall process. And again, this is just the example from EONS. You can make this whatever you want. You can also decide when this gets added in, and also if when it gets added in, is it visible to the submitter? So if you've got, for whatever reason, if you would want to keep this sort of private amongst the approvers, you could do that. There's lots of other uses for this. It's sort of akin to the old paper forms where you had a box at the bottom that said for office use only. You could use it just like that. And again, you can decide whether or not when it gets added, is it visible to the whole team or just the approvers? Okay. Anything else I forgot? Oh, you see here down the side, we've got the events, the other events on the calendar happening around on those dates. So your approval team, we sync in. I guess the KMR calendar. And when Ursula started this event, she had to pick her dates, and it would warn her if there were other things on that date. It doesn't prevent her from submitting it for those dates, but it warns her. And then once it's in here, your approval team can see the whole time. So I might look at this as Spike and say, well, we've also got too many things going on that day. I could jump into the discussion area and discuss with her. So, hey, we've already got 18 things going on the 30th. Can we please pick a different day for this? And if she said, yeah, okay, the next month, the 15th works for me, then you could just say, okay, great. And all that discussion would be recorded in there. And then one of you could just click in here and use the date things to change that lickety split. Okay.
That's
So,
really cool.
yep. So I'm going to move that out of the way. And I know Sarah is very keen on learning the mechanics of how the forms get made and everything. So what shall I do? Okay, I think what I'll do is we'll look in here and we'll just look at a simple example, and then we'll jump in and I'll show you that example from Onslow, which sort of just builds on the same techniques. Okay, so I'm going to go into manage forms here. So this is what Sarah can do. Not all staff can go in this area. And you can see we've got here our initial forms and our additional forms. So really, it's really only EOTC that uses additional forms. So every initial forms are always the starting point. Additional forms are the ones that can get added in to build up the workflow. And we're going to look down at my EOTC event proposal form. So again, so on this tab here, and I think Sarah's familiar with this, is just your basic settings. What's it called? What's the naming convention for EOTC? This is probably the appropriate thing to allow them to name it. And there's the prompt for them. Please name your EOTC event. For a given, over here in the gray box, you can have user access. So here you can limit who can use the form. So if I just set Spike in there now, Spike is the only one that can use this workflow. This is also great for when you're testing things. So Sarah and Gareth, you might put your names in here, and that way while you're testing things out, only the two of you would see it and be able to use it while you're setting things up. This is the status, whether it's active. Again, this is basically on and off. You can also use this function now, which is restricted. This is a new feature normally all the staff forms are initiated by the staff member themselves. So they're starting something, they want to propose something, whether it's EOTC or requesting leave or whatever. But you also have use cases where you want to prompt them. You want to send out a form to all staff or a selection of staff. And that's what this does. So if we set it to restricted, it's not a form that they could initiate themselves, but it's one you send to them. In the EOTC context, what you might use that for is your staff EOTC agreement form, which is one of the templates that EONS offers and we have in the system, and you can use that, and you might use that for this, where you gather all the staff's abilities and pledge of behavior and all that. So you just set it to restricted, and then you click here to assign the staff that you want to fill it out, and then it sends them an email with a message that you add in there, and that it starts them off. It prompts them that you need to do this form. This one, we're going to leave it active. This is one you'll want to consider, the duplication settings. So per workflow, you can set whether or not it can be duplicated. So, there are different philosophies around that. Usually I say I recommend not doing that, but it depends on the context. You'll get pushback from staff who they'll say, I've done this trip 800 times, or especially more along the sports department where their events tend to be very sort of regular and sometimes repetitive, and they would want to be able to duplicate what they handed in last time. But we give you that control. So one of the things that I always recommend is if you have a need to, you don't have to create one workflow. If you see here in my Schoolbridge example, Tidewater example, if I go here and click Start Forms, I've got a general EOTC event proposal, but I've also got a sport events proposal. And doing that allows you to just to sort of customize things fit to purpose. And it might be that you might have even a separate one. So maybe if you've got one that is that you want to allow to be copied, you could approach it that way. It's just for special instances. And again, if you set this to everything, it will copy everything. It will copy all the forms and all the information that was entered into the forms the previous time. It's not as bad as just simply, running it through a copy machine, because the forms are still, all of the fields are still editable. So they can amend things, they can change things. And then, of course, once they submit it, it has to go through past you and the approval team for another, couple sets of eyes to check things. But anyway, it's up to you whether or not you allow them to duplicate a given workflow. We've got our date settings. You can have a single date picker, a date range picker, non-consecutive date picker. If I go back here as Spike, and if Spike were to use this, I think this one is using the non-consecutive date picker. So you can see here, Spike has to pick an HOD. In this case, the HOD is preset between these couple of people. He's got to give his event a name. He's got to pick the first occurrent date. And then because this is the non-consecutive date, he could also go and pick that it was Friday and the following Monday, and add as many days as you want. But we've got that. And again, what you set for the date setting is going to depend on, how, your events and types of things you do. But we've got single date picker, date range. So that would be, the 10th to the 15th, the non-consecutive or no date picker. So if you're using the system for other things, Sarah, like maintenance requests or anything that doesn't necessarily tie it to the calendar, you can set it to no date picker. And you can also set it to private. So things like personal leave, you'd probably want to set that to private. So the whole reason for this date picker is not only to get your event dates, but also to peg it to the calendar. Because if I go back here as let's look at a real school. If I go to my staff forms here at Onslow, I can look at everything here in a list view. And of course, I can sort on status. I can also search. So I can search on tags. So if I want to just look at EOTC, and now I'm only going to see EOTC submissions, and I can restrict it to the past 6 months and all that. But I can also look at it on a calendar. So I can see all of the events and see how they're spread out on a calendar. So this is really, really, really useful, especially for you as a coordinator. I can see how everything relates to each other and where it falls on the calendar. And it also is great because these things will, for staff, will also flow out onto your, if you've got it. Now I'll go back here to Nayland. Well, actually, let me do it on Schoolbridge. On Tidewater. If I go here, the staff calendar, they will flow out onto the overall calendar for staff. And so if let's see if I've got, so here I go. So the things that are black, I can actually turn off all these other things and just look at my forms. I think, did I do that right? Oh, right. So if I just want to look at my, what did I do? I can filter it out and I can see my forms. I can click on it. And what we're adding here, which will is coming really soon, is view students. Or you can see I've got my slips. So here's a permission slip that's showing on the calendar for staff. And one of the feature requests was a way for other staff that are not necessarily involved directly in the event, to see, okay, which students are away that day or involved in that event. And we're going to have a thing here where they can click view students and they'll be able to see that. So that's
just a
coming soon.
question on that calendar.
Yeah.
Is it pulling through everything that's already been put in Kmart, as well as any EOTC things that have been put through Skillbridge?
Yes.
Yeah. So the Kmart things will automatically be sitting there.
Yes.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, and you can tweak it. So I don't know if you guys use the colors enough, or those categories that denote colors, but you can, if we go, oops, calendar setup. So here you can see, you can, these are those Kmart colors. You can actually give them names. You can give them meaning. So on the calendar, you'll say, if all the red things are sports, if that color for your if your school means sports, then you can give it a name and that will show that name. If there's one that you don't use, you can just simply leave this label empty and it won't show on the calendar as a filter at the top. So just to sort of, specify it to your school.
Setup. Settings. So question on that, those colors, are you saying that if you assign an event a color in Kmart, then it's pulling through those particular, that's how it's categorizing in Skillbridge? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so if we're really careful about categorizing by colors in Kmart, then it will actually help how it pulls through in Skillbridge.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
So, yep. And you can see here when I'm looking at the calendar, you can see that one I renamed to sport, and that's why it's showing the word sport here. If you don't, it will just show the color names. But anyway, it's there, and whatever colors you limit yourself to, that allows you to just weed out the ones that you're not using. It's also really great. There's a term view or a week view. So if you click that, you can see it on the sort of the week view term calendar.
Yeah.
And you can subscribe, so people can subscribe and get the thing into their personal device or something. Or if you go to if you'd want, and this might be something for you, Evan, is here you can also get feeds of just the permission slips and or the forms. So here you can see we can get a feed of the both the forms and the permission slips, or just the forms or just the permission slips. So that way in your personal device or your personal calendar, you could just see those events, basically the same view that you're seeing when you go to staff forms and do that. You could see the events showing up, on your personal Google Calendar or whatever. Okay, so we got a bit tracked off. I know people get excited about calendars, but we'll go back into this one, back into the setup here. Okay, so we covered the calendar settings. This is another one that you can set colors. So you can see here on Spike's view, there are color dots. And if you like organizing things by color, you can do that. And you can see here you can set the default color that the thing has. And then what you can do is you can define the colors. I think we've defined some here. That's also in settings. And then what happens is when the final approver gives final approval, you can change the color to denote something. Some people just absolutely love organizing things by color. So if you do, you can do that. You just go into settings and define what your colors mean, and then you can either set the initial color, and then, as I said, whoever gives final approval can change the color. Okay, this is the permission slip linking. which is set to required. So that means in order for your staff to submit their proposal, they have to link in and at least start the permission slip. And again, per workflow, you can set whether or not that's required. So you might have another workflow where, you know, a permission slip is not required, like, well, for anything, and do that.
So that for a second in terms of workflow, because I would imagine that in some cases, people will be wanting to know that their event is approved before they have created a permission slip to go out to parents.
Yep, that's okay, and you can work that way. So I'll show you. So if I'm Spike, let's just do it. Say I am Spike, and I start off this proposal. You can see it tells me here that my permission slip is required, and it's just linking it. So there's not really a way we can. Well, I guess we could, but we don't do that. So I've got to pick my approver, my HOD. I'm going to pick this, and I'll just call this the year 10 camp and swim, just to have a different thing. My first occurrence will be, let's say it's the 24th. Okay, click and create. And you see I've got, some reason I've got my hungy already. I've got this form, and you'll see I've got obviously any field on this initial form that's required, I have to fill that in before I can submit. If I try to submit this now, it's going to tell me that I haven't done, and it should alert me. So this one is required, and I didn't fill it in. So I've got to say yes or no. And then it does that for this form, but also you can see here, I've got my permission slip.
Yeah, actually, I can see that the permission slip is at the end, so you can actually still, excuse me, it looks to me like you can still submit your initial proposal before
these three things I would have. The way this one is set up, I have these. I don't know why that's on there. I don't need that. But this is what it should be, and this is set up so I can't submit this until I've linked it. So it's just about linking. So if I go in here now, I create permission slip, and that's it. That's all I really need to do. So now I can, if I filled in everything else on my initial form, I can submit, even though I haven't set up anything on this permission slip yet. I can do that way. Yeah, I've got to. So, and if Ursula or Spike submitted this, and you know, depending on how you want to set things up, you would just have to say, okay, you know, maybe that you would build that structurally into your approval stages, like after you've been given initial approval, now do your permission slip, and you could have that, and you could have a dedicated approval stage for just the permission slip if you wanted to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That might be more evident as we go through the rest of this. Okay. So we've got our form. Okay, so that's permission slip linking, tag. Okay, we've covered all that. Okay, so the next step here is our proposal form. And again, this particular
that part I'm okay with. So the editing the form, that part I'm really comfortable with.
Great. I'll just point out a couple of differences with this one. So this one is based on the EON's latest version of the EON's form, but we've added a few things to take advantage of the features of SchoolBridge. The first one being this. So the reason for this that's added is precisely to match up the required risk assessment element. So and this is a simple way of doing it. And when I show you the Onslow one, you'll see a more involved version. But here it is, just simply is if by ticking one of these options, I have to tick one of these options, and it's going to match up. So if I'm ticking new event, that means it's something that's brand new, and I'm going to need to do a full risk assessment form. That's that form number 2 from EONS. But if you've got any defined for your school, any standard operating procedures defined for your school, you could have those be set up and then added in. So when Ursula did her adrenaline force before, she picked that one. That's why the adrenaline force standard operating procedures got automatically added for her. Okay,
Cool.
and when we look at the tab where we add the rules for the forms, will show how that works.
Cool.
There's another thing that's in our examples, as well as what you'll see from the Onslow examples, which is really about adding an element of, I would say, responsibility and declaration to the forms, which is something that's a little bit missing from the EONS forms, where you have an ability to, including a way for staff to declare certain things and sort of attest to things. So this is an example of that. So we're saying to them, if is there a possibility of anything aquatic? If there is, you've got to sort of declare what that might possibly be. Or if they're really sure that that's not, that they say no, but then we let them know that they've really got to mean it. I learned that as a parent myself, when my daughter did the history trip down to Wellington, and I'm pretty sure the permission slip that I signed didn't talk about swimming, but the second day they were there, I got all these photos of her classmates that were jumping in the harbor. And so it's just that, obviously, if that's the case and we live in New Zealand and, there's water everywhere and kids love to get in water. So you just got to be aware of that. Anyway, it's a way of just highlighting that.
That's
And
awesome.
there's a couple of other examples of that. And as you know, Sarah, every element of the forms, you can adjust it and change it to your needs. Here's another one. So the weather planning. So this is in the EONS toolkit forms, the version 2.0, but here we're just using this to as a trigger. So if we tick yes, then later on we'll have that weather tracking, that forecast tracking form added in. And we've got really good examples of that. That is something, that's a form that doesn't exist from EONS. So they don't provide a place to record that, but we do.
Awesome.
We can do it as well with budgeting. So this is always a thorny issue, and every school does it differently. But we could use this. So there's a bunch of ways to do this. If I tick yes, that could be my trigger that loads my budget form later on. Or if I add here an amount and say your school's policy, that is, if a event is over $500, then the budget form needs to get added in. Or another thing we've got, which is a new feature, is dynamic stages. So if your school, the policy is if they enter in $500 here, that it needs to get approved by the financial person, then you can have that be. And then if it was 300, then that stage won't apply. So in this case, it's not over $500, so we don't need to bother Mary in the finance department because it doesn't apply. The rule doesn't apply. So again,
some of those rules that I definitely want some help with, just getting all those up correctly.
Yep. Okay, and there might be other. So again, transport, we'll use that as a trigger, and anything else you can use that technique. The other thing that I wanted to point out is down here with this section. So what this is, there always will be external things that you need to document or bring into the flow. And what we're doing here is we're simply providing staff a link to some of those external things that they might need, say like an external provider agreement or the individual student support plan. And all I'm doing here is I'll open this in a new window, and you can see I've just taken the EONS template and I've added my Tidewater College logo to it. And so this is one of the templates in the toolkit. I think most providers will have their own agreement that they give you. But anyway, so the idea is here, if you were going to use this, you give your staff access to any of those external things that they might need. And then in your forms, you make sure that you've got a provision for them to attach that. So up here, you can see I've got a question will this event use external providers? If it's no, then fine. If it's yes, though, I get the section that opens up where I can put in the details about the external provider, and then I have a place where I can upload and attach any documentation I've got from those providers or provider. So again, making sure that and again, you don't have to do this. It's just there as an option, but I think it's pretty good in a way. Okay, so that's our forms, and that's what's different about that one. Everything else on that form is stock standard from the EONS form. What's nice about the Onslow example that I'll show you here in a minute, it's sort of just an evolution of that. It's really it's very similar, but it's tweaked, and I think it's more reflective of somebody that's on the ground dealing with a large school and doing it. So we'll see what's different about that here in a second. Okay, approver stages. So here's where you set up your approval chain of command. The first one here is the dynamic stage. This is optional. You can set that to on, and it will apply, as you saw there with Spike's submission, where he had to choose an HOD. And you can see that's where we have preset them. If we take these people off, then that drop down that Spike would have had all the staff in the school listed in there. So it's up to you if if you're going to use this and you know who your possible HODs are, you can preset them. And then whoever you set here will be in that drop down. The other advantage of doing that, presetting them if you can, I mean, I think most schools actually don't because there's so many, but if you do, you can preset their decline or approval and decline responses. Again, just to streamline things for them. And we'll cover more about what that means down below. You can also exempt staff from a given stage. So say if these three, Hardin and Abilene, don't need to get pre-approval for themselves, then you could put them in here, or any other staff that would need to. So that exempts them from that. Then down below here, we have our static stages, and you can create any number of them. You just click add stage. You can drag them around and reorder them now. If we go into one, you see the similar settings to what we saw with the HOD approval. Another thing, at all stages, you can set now whether or not they're about approval or just acknowledgement. So you might have a fixture in your team that this person's job is not really about giving approval for anything, but they've just got to acknowledge that they received it. So, and you want to record that. Say maybe it's not the calendar person's job, or say maybe a relief, somebody that needs to arrange relief, and then you could structurally add in a stage here and call it relief, and assign the person whose job is that, and set it to acknowledge received, so that way their role is not about approving anything, just acknowledging that they've dealt with it. Here's where we put the approval persons, and we can put as many people in there as we need. So to build up redundancy, if we left it like that and left it to anyone, then whoever Spike, Lucy, or Michaela, whoever got in there first would be the approver, and they'd approve it and it would go to the next stage. If we set it to all of them, then we'd have all three of these people would need to approve it before it would move to the next stage. And again, the uses of this is to either have, it's a shared role, or you just want to build in redundancy. So that way, if Spike wasn't around, Kara could do it, or vice versa. They could back each other up. The next little option here is that dynamic influence on the stage itself. So the default is always apply this stage. The next option here is to have it apply only on the basis of a condition. And again, if we use that financial example, we could look down to our costing and here the budget, and because that's a number field or a currency field, we could set here $500 if that was the case. And so this would mean that whoever the approval person or this entire stage would only be included in the workflow if the budget was equal to or greater than $500. And if it wasn't, then it would skip that stage and just go on to whatever's next. Okay.
So can you just run through a couple more examples on that? So that budget one makes sense. Some of the
Yeah.
other ones you mentioned,
Another one would be down here, I think.
like the transport.
You would have a transport that, like, is transport required, and maybe your school has got a dedicated person to arrange transport, and then so you could have that be in there. Or another really good one is, I think I'm missing it on this one, would be relief. So you'd have a question: does relief required for any of the staff involved? And then you could have the relief person be in it. But whatever questions you've got on your initial form will show here, and you can do it. So if this question is, will use providers, or let's just say it says, is relief required, is equal to yes. And then it will meet, then it would meet the condition.
Cool.
Okay, and then down below here, you can set your default approval and decline responses. So you can see here, you can have anything in here. I give approval, you can preload as much as you want, and you can do the @mention here as well. So say Nolan's job is to do something or just to be aware of it. Again, this is a really powerful feature that schools use for all kinds of things. And it would, as soon as Spike gives approval for this stage, it'll automatically enter his a comment here that we've preset, and it would notify Nolan. And so you could have Nolan, please arrange relief, if that's the way you worked, or however you wanted to do it, or please polish up the kayaks, or whatever it needed to be.
Cool.
And this, when Spike goes to give his approval, this is still editable. So if he clicks approval and say, for instance, for a given event, we don't need to bother Nolan about it. We can delete him before he clicks the approve button to change it sort of on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. So that's it. And you can create as many stages as you need to and rearrange them. Now we've got two other new features here. One is the email action. So this allows you to send out an email when it gets to final approval. It will automatically fire off an email, and not too much use for this. I think in EOTC, it's much more. It was actually added there for schools using the system for staff reimbursements who use like things like Xero and a thing called HubDocs, where you can send it a PDF. They give you an email address, and you put that your Xero or HubDocs email address in here, and tick this box on, and then it will send a PDF of the submission. And we've got an example in the template library of a reimbursement form where staff can upload the receipts, and that HubDoc system will ingest that PDF and do whatever it does to put it into your your records. And that's what you could use it for. And the other thing to note here is this recipient can be any email address. So you could potentially maybe use it to fire off a copy of the submission to somebody on the board or something like that if you wanted to. That might be something. And then lastly here, you can have multiple email actions. And then lastly, you can set up your default evaluation stage and set how many days after the event to send out the reminder, which form to use, and you click in there and you have all of your additional forms there, and you can choose the appropriate form. And then this is the message that they get with their reminder, something like that. And that's it. So that's the approval stages, and then we've got the additional forms. So this is where it really it looks complicated, but it's really pretty easy. So over here we've got all of your additional forms that are active. We've got a bunch of these, so a lot of these are those standard operating procedures that you'll see here. And then over here, when you click it, it goes over here. So I'll just remove the budget. Well, here's an example of the budget form. So if we look at this, actually, I'll look at this. So you can see this one. When I did my submission as Spike, I got this hungy standard operating procedures from the start, because when you add one in here, I'll do that. So I'm going to remove that one, and let's find the on-site barbecue. So I'll add that one. And you see, when I add that standard operating procedure, the default behavior, the default rules always attach. That's why when Spike, that example that I just showed you, he got that immediately. So he got 2 forms from the start. But that's usually not what you want. So we're going to go in and edit the logic. And you can see how it's really easy to set up the rules. So generally what you'll be using is this one. So attach this form after an approval stage is approved, and if a value on the initial form meets a condition. So if we look here, we'll have our stages, and we know on my example, the pivotal stage, the hinge stage, is that calendar approval. So we know we don't need to provide a standard operating procedures or any other things until it gets past that point, because it's just not necessary. So we're waiting until calendar has been approved and we can check a condition. So this is a hungy, but let's just say my question was blah, 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 blah. Does it use external providers? We'll just say, imagine that says, are you doing a barbecue? Or if that's one of my tick boxes, is equal to yes. Now, where does that come from? Well, if we look back at our form, and a better example is really this one. So let's look at this one. We're doing the same thing. We're waiting until calendar approval is set, and if what activities are planned for this event is equal to, and then we're checking the value if it says new event. Where does that come from? If we go back to our form and we look at that question, there it is. What activities are planned for this event? And we look here and we look at the data. So this first tab here shows you the question. So that's or what we call the label up here. And then we've got this tab where we set all of these options that are here, the tick boxes below. And so we've got new event, and the value there is new event. If I add another, if I wanted to add here, I could add barbecue. And then you see it automatically adds in my value. You can actually name these if you wanted to. You could make this 1, you could make this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It doesn't matter what this value is. It just needs to match exactly, and it is case sensitive. So if this is lowercase bbq, and when you type it in, if you just add in, so if I do test event, you can see the convention that it follows is what we call camel case. And it's a lowercase, the first term lowercase, and then capitalizing the second. That's the camel's hump. It's just that whatever the value is in here, you need to match it exactly, and it's case sensitive. So that's why this new event is what we're checking there. So if I go out of this now and go back to my additional forms and we look at that, we can see that we're waiting until after calendar approval, and we're looking at that question. If it has the value new event, then
that's really helpful, and I think that's one of the bits I was getting stuck on was getting like that to work. So that's really helpful to understand how that's working.
And I'll just go through the other options here. So this is another one, a new feature, keep it open once it's added. And this is something you might want to consider for all of your planning forms, and depends on how you want to approach things. But if I tick this on, when the form gets added, it stays open. So they can keep adding it, information to it, and sort of submitting it and working on it over time until you're ready to close it. So you, as the approvers, have the option to lock it. And we'll probably be going to be adding a feature here on the stages to automatically lock after approval or something like that. But anyway, you do have the ability to lock them at the end when you're ready. And I think everything gets automatically locked at the end. But anyway, We actually added this here for something like the checklists. So you could have a form that's, again, a checklist for the submitter, for the person in charge. And that's a thing that you would want to keep open so they could go in and keep notes and tick things off during the whole process. So anyway, that keeps it open. Then we've also got the ability here to attach it on a day or at a certain time relating to the start of the event. So we added this precisely for the weather checking element. So the recommendation for checking the forecast is 7 days prior, the day before, and the day of. And here, so if we set this to a negative value, it's days before the event. So I would set that to 7 days prior to the event for the week before. And then it won't get added in until 7 days, and also keeping in this logic. So waiting to it's after calendar approval, and if this is weather dependent. So we would look here for weather dependent is equal to yes, is the way you would set that up. So in this case, it will check to see if calendar approval has been passed, and it will look to see if that value is yes, and it will wait till 7 days, because every time a new form gets added into the process, a reminder goes to the person. So it would act to remind them. But we've also got, and that's actually the next thing here, is a whole roster of reminders that you can do now. So you can create any number of reminders. And again, it's all keyed off into the start date of the event. So here is the example. I've got, again, thinking of that weather forecasting check. If required, check the weather forecast and record it on the weather check form. And you could set that to 1 day prior, and then this would go off 1 day prior to the event, and you can include the submitter and your EOTC coordinator. So again, it's just a handy way to keep your team on track and remind them of milestones or things they need to be on top of, all leading up to the event and even after the event. So if you set this to 0, it's the day of the event. If you set it to positive numbers, it's days after the event. And you can create as many of those reminders, excuse me, as you need to. Okay, any questions on that?
No, that's really good. That's really helpful.
Okay.
And I think I understand how to get those rules working better for me.
Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just show you. So now you understand the basics, and now I'll show you an approach that's in this one. So from somebody on the ground really using the system for full effect. And now this one encompasses everything. So this again, this is the one example from Onslow, and he's set this system up to encompass and take care of everything related to EOTC. So you can see this is pretty much the same, but where it gets more advanced is here, where we just had one tick box or one extra tick box. So what activities are you planning? Here he's broken it down and got a lot more specific. And so we can say, is it on-site or off-site? And if it's on-site, we'll see there's all of the things that are possibly happening at on-site. So I get a whole nother set based on the fact that I've ticked on-site. And so, and this again will match up with the either, you can see there's that barbecue one. So if I do that now, it'll match up with my standard operating procedures for hosting a barbecue at school.
Can you just quickly on that, just show me in behind the scenes and editing forms, just to make sure I've got the setting right?
Sure. Sure. So this one, and I'm gonna this is not there yet, but I'm going to put this in the template library along with all of the associated standard operating procedures, so everybody can use them. But anyway, so here we are. You can see here's that example. So event on site, and when I ticked on site, both this and this appeared. You can see, and if I would have ticked off site, then this and this would appear. And the way that is, again, it's just here in the settings. So we go into the settings for this, and for anything here, we've got under conditional. And it said, set this, this should display yes if And then here are all, again, all of my questions. Is it on-site or off-site? Is equal to on-site. Very similar to the other thing. So because it's set, if I tick that, it will set that value to on-site in there. And if we look at the values of this, you'll see here the data here. It's on-site and off-site, and that's all
Yeah,
it's
I
doing.
think that might have been where I was getting tripped up again, was using the label rather than the value. So yeah, no, that's cool. I understand how to do that.
Okay. And so again, doing this, if I'm on site, and this is going to match up with my appropriate risk assessment elements down the track with the rules that were set on.
Can you also, because you don't have that as a template at the moment, would you mind just screenshotting just that little bit there that's different and just emailing that to me, just so that if we do want to set something up.
It will be in the templates by the end of today.
Okay, great. Awesome.
Chris, would you be able to also, I mean, I see you're recording this. Could you share with us this?
I most certainly will.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, and then offsite. So we see that. Well, I've probably set this one wrong. I have to fix that. Let me go back to this one. So what I'm doing is taking the Onslow one and I'm sort of universalizing it. I probably still need to tweak that. Offsite. There we go. New, that's going to get the full risk assessment, and then he's got there are standard operating procedures for all those. So let's take a look at some of those, because that's the interesting bit. And again, if we go here, so let's look at the barbecue one. Again, and these will all be in templates. You'll be able to take them and tweak them. He's done a really good job of this.
You mean there's a whole bunch of standard operating procedures that are already in templates?
Yes, and well, no, there will be. So these ones, and that's what we hope to do. So we have, you know, this is something I think that EONs themselves have been working toward. They have their, if we go to EONs and we look under here, managers, they've got a set. Of course, the sort of the limitation, I guess I'd say, of what EONs provides is that they're really have been always focused on the outdoor ed thing. So you're camping, you're, you know, snorkeling and all of these things. And you can see that they have produced a series of best practice guides. And these are essentially risk assessments and assessment points for all of these different kinds of events. And what we did in also at the end of last year is for that go here in the Streamline folder, that form number 2. So say if we're doing a new event where we've got to do a full risk assessment, if we preview this one now, what you'll see is we've got this element here, and EONs had actually told us for a long time we would love it if we could make that practice guides risk assessment data points available to all schools in some way. And that's what we did. So here I can select activity, say archery, and then boom, I get that risk assessment matrix of, you know, hazards and harms, hazards, and controls that will automatically load in for me. I can adjust it. So these are still would be editable to me. So if I need to add things to it, I need to record who's going to be responsible for that, of course, and so on. And I can add here, I can add another hazard, I can add another harm, I can add a whole nother activity out of that database. And you can see what we've got in here is we've expanded it to, we've included, it was not in the best practice guides and not something that EONs ever really focuses on, but general academic event, general EOTC non-aquatic, general sports events, and even should be in here now, mountain biking. Anyway, we've added all those in, and so your staff can you know, take advantage of that and use that, and or just start with a blank canvas. So here, are there any other things? And we tick yes, and then they can go and add their harms, hazards, controls, and checks, and do that as needed. Right. And then so sort of extending on from that would be a library of standard operating procedures. And we've got an example here in the system, but it's only just an example based on the EONS examples. If we go back now and look at the barbecue one, again, so obviously if they tick that on-site and barbecue, then this will add in. And again, the whole point of the standard operating procedures is to record your accrued knowledge about, and what your procedures are. If you're hosting a barbecue at Nayland College, this is what you need to do. And of course, this is what it is I think it's going to be pretty universal. So things, and then that's the top bit. That's the part A. The part B, are the thing that we've added, and you can see that also are doing here is that declarative bit again. This is not on the EONS forms, their example of standard operating procedures, but I think it's really important. So here you're getting the organizer, the person in charge, again, to declare that they've read all of the great information and things that they need to be aware of here above, and anything else that you provide them, and they're declaring that.
That's
And
really
then
good.
the section B here down below is where you're recording, okay, for this instance of this event, what do we need to be aware of? And again, the more of these standard operating procedures and the way you can work this way for your team, I think the happier they will be, the more streamlined you can make things. And yeah, you can really lock down your procedures.
So is there a template similar to that that's available for us today?
There will be. At the end of the day, I just need to go through and take these and make sure they're universal. I mean, there were things on here that were specific to Onslow that I need to remove, just make it easier for people to use, and things that don't apply to other schools. And this really, this form that here, this is the real really in a pretty involved form. So this one, what he's done, instead of having separate things, he's really, and I think we would have moved to this eventually, is condensed everything else. So this is really most everything needed in one form. So you can see we've got from the activities and to match up risk assessment. We're gathering in student groups, and seeing, and this is something that EONs, they're not working out of school, so there's certain things that they are not concerned with in a way. How is it the attendance affecting school? So recording that. The itinerary, that's the same. Event staffing is pretty much the same. We've got the ability in here to record their relief and stuff. So that's all here. He's included a basic budget form all in this form here as well, where I can enter in all of my costs. I know for a fact that there are some schools where this simple budget form wouldn't fly with their financial department. They want much more specific stuff. We've got an example of a very advanced budget form in the template library that you can use. I think this is really good if this will suffice. You can see you can do the this is all part of the budgets here. The relief, recording the relief. So this becomes a repeating section where they can put in the date they're away and which period they need the relief for. This is the whole transport section, I think, is really well done. So he's not necessarily doing a separate transport form, I think. But in here, I've got options for doing all of these different things. And then depending on what I choose here, these things will pop up, and they've got the instructions, okay, how to book a van and do that for the school. And so you can see that's going to be different. So I've changed that in the other example. Recording this stuff. I've also changed the formatting on this on the one. So I'm adding some improvements to this as well. You can see here he's linking to a driver agreement form. Now, this one's actually linking to a staff form in SchoolBridge to get the driver agreement from staff members, or you can upload signed driver agreements, and that would be one you could, obviously link to.
Cool.
Right. Flight details. So again, if I chose up atop there, choose flying, then I would be able to record in the flight details here, all that good stuff. So
It's incredibly detailed, isn't it?
yeah, really, really well thought out. Site visits, and nice matrix checking, all that stuff. The accommodation stuff. It's really all in one thing, and I think it's good. The external providers again, so we're doing that same thing. The other thing, so he's giving 3 options or 1 option, putting in the providers details here, and then ability to upload things, and if things are stored, he's a big Google proponent. If storing things on Google Drive and being able to enter in the link to the Google Drive information. Yeah. So anyway, I will have, what I'll do for you, Sarah, is I will, hopefully I should be able to get all of this into the template library today. And I'll also do that. And then I'll show you, if we go back to him, because, the forms are only part of the puzzle. The other thing is, where has he got this? Oh, here. We go in and we look at form number 4, and now because he's got all of those standard operating procedures, we've got a lot of this, so all the things that are in there. And as you know, it looks rather complicated, but it's pretty simple once you get it set up. And you can see he's opting to use that always open feature, so that during the whole planning process, that can stay open for as long as they need it to be. So anyway,
So
and what I'll do,
I have, back to the permission slip side of things, can you just show me how you're linking in the template for people to use? Better, because I understand how we're setting up consent forms and they choose which consent form, but how did you link in the letter, the template letter?
Oh, okay, right. So that template, yeah. So that's just here in settings. So you can go in here and you can see we've got this section here, EOTC and permission slips, and we've got permission slips, and here is the settings. So you can have a default internal note. So that's the thing that prints out on the first page of the take along report. You can have that, basically have it in there to prompt your staff as to what you'd like them to put some in there, if you would like them to put something in there. And then here is the default description. And this currently what I've got in this one, and I can put this in yours if you'd like. This is based on the EON's recommended template now. And what we've got is anything that's in the curly brackets will get automatically sort of like a mail merge. It will be replaced with the actual data. And we've got in here a menu here where you can see you've got staff name, student name, leader mobile. That was one that I think is really crucial. Slip name, strip start date, and due date. And so those variables you can have in there. And then what I'm suggesting with this example is staff just need to change what's in the square brackets to fit their event.
Cool.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
This is one I would consider, just like with checking the weather forecasts, the problem that happened last year with up at Whangarei Boys in the caves, a lot of that came down to the inability of parents to reach the person in charge. So by having that leader, the mobile phone, and whether or not you have it included here, so this would include the mobile phone number of the staff member sending this slip automatically. But again, it's something you might want to consider. Okay. Let's see. Whoa, we did that really well. 11 through almost 11:30. Do you have any urgent questions based on what we've covered today?
I think I'll check with Gavin, but I think for me it's going to be more me and Gavin sitting down and sort of looking at our setup and actually, you know, working through it. And if we come up against any tricky bits as we go, then we might need to flick an email question. But I think we now need to just get back into our forms and
Yeah.
our next steps. But that's all really, really helpful.
Great. Gavin, you're so very lucky to have Sarah. She is so good at this stuff. I will endeavor to get all these templates uploaded. Sarah, I'll let you know as soon as I've got them there. I will also, if Sarah, when you're setting things, if you'd like to just like jump on with me, I'll try to screenshot some of the rules and things that Jono and Onslow has set up, so you can get a feel for that as well. But if you would ever like to jump in and just have a look, you know, behind the curtain at what Onslow is doing, I'd be happy to jump on with you and show you that.
Okay, thank you. Really appreciate it, because it is actually helpful to see how other schools have actually already got it set up. It gives us a picture of kind of what we're aiming for.
We've been looking at a template, Chris, that he uses for his generic one. It would be really useful if that was a template.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. We'll have all that in there. And you know, who knows, maybe you guys would someday contribute standard operating procedures, templates, or to share with other schools as well.
Definitely needs to be the way schools go rather than us all creating our own.
Yeah. Okay, guys, have a lovely day and a great break if I don't speak to you before then.
Great. Thanks so much, Chris.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That letter is not in